This video presents content from Chapter 4 of the book Sustainable Living and World Peace. This video is the first of two videos on a section entitled Whether We Have an Enemy or Someone We Can Engage With, and Whether We Have Peace or Conflict are really a matter of perception, choice, and virtue. Although there are numerous theories on international relationships, the main three can be considered to be realism, liberalism, and constructivism. Realism views sovereign states as autonomous entities with no higher authority above them. Since there is no higher authority above them to influence or regulate their interactions with each other, a state of anarchy essentially exists in their relationships with each other. This creates a survival mentality where nations act in their own best interests, resulting in a struggle for power among nations. Realism's beliefs are that a competitive environment exists where economic success, military might, and diplomatic and political maneuvering drive each nation in their struggle for security and power in a world void of any higher authority than sovereign states. Instead of anarchy and a complete lack of order among nations, liberalism asserts that there are common interests that can be shared by nations, providing them with chances for cooperative efforts. For instance, cooperative economic development and interdependence creates a situation where nations would be much less willing to engage in hostilities with other nations, since that would cause destructive results to shared economic interests. A type of liberalism, called liberal institutionalism, asserts that international organizations such as the United Nations can provide chances for successful cooperation and peace-building opportunities. Constructivism emphasizes that people's perceptions and thoughts of relationships actually shape the relationships we see in reality. Beliefs of a country's relationships with other countries create the reality of the relationships we experience. Constructivism views human ideas playing a much bigger role in relationships than material power and interdependence. The social structure of relationships we see in the physical world comes to fruition through relationship structures we perceive in our minds. What we experience in the real world depends on what we believe are real causes for friendly or adversarial relationships. Something we can be sure of is that common virtues and values and collective human understanding can have a far more influential and cohesive effect on nations' relationships with each other than any material or physical factors. For hundreds of years, England and France were the greatest enemies and the greatest rivals. For hundreds of years, people would have rationally thought that these countries were natural adversaries and could never exist together peacefully. This once rational thinking turned out to be completely wrong, as is witnessed today, since these two countries are as close as any two countries in the world, and the people of these countries get along as well as any in the world. If we look back on history, we can find that countries were at war with or allies with the same countries over time. Even the United States, which has a relatively short history compared to many old world countries, has been in conflict with many nations, some of which we consider to be close allies now. Although we cannot necessarily expect to be close allies with all other nations, we can at least consciously and committedly remain on peaceful terms with any and all countries and quit looking for and expecting to see enemies and adversaries. What if all people all over the world and leaders of all nations treated people in other countries as being endowed with the rights we believe in and expect as American citizens? Then all people would be treated as equal and respected for their rights to live freely, peacefully, and pursue happiness. We should expect that our leaders and our international relationships are held to the standards of the people's virtue. However, if we look at the causes of conflict around the world, we will see that the causes do not stem from the people of the different nations opposing each other. What is actually to blame for adversarial relationships is our leaders' poor diplomacy and our unwillingness to accept personal responsibility for our international relationships. Our leaders seem to fail at diplomacy and then tell us, look how bad that country is, we can't deal with them. This breakdown in diplomacy is because of a leader's failings or misdirection, and not because of differences on a personal level among the peoples of these nations. Throughout history, many people have fought and died in wars, even though they personally had nothing against the people they were fighting, and never even knew them. Our pal virtue dictates that we choose to find a course of action toward peaceful and prosperous sustainability. The solution for complete sustainability and peace will need to begin at the individual level and progress through more complex levels of human organization up to the level of nations. If we do not accept this responsibility and do nothing, we live more at the whims of our ineffective leaders and policymakers. We need to try to see life on the level of people of every nation, which is the same level we live our lives on. The ultimate responsibility to create world peace will be in the hands of individuals through their own commitment to all people's general well-being. The people of the different nations of the world should not allow the relationships among them as individuals to be established by the relationships that could develop at the level of the leaders of the different nations. Different leaders will have different personalities and abilities, and these differences could make them unwilling or unable to create and foster positive and prosperous relationships with the imperfect leaders of other nations. Also, the peoples of different nations should not allow the relationships among them as individuals to be established by the relationships that develop at the level of industries or businesses among different nations. Relationships at this level, or any other human society level, could possibly be influenced by attitudes and ambitions not necessarily reflective of the natural sentiments of the potentially affected people. The people of the different nations of the world should allow the relationships among them as individuals to be established only by the natural values and virtues that exist among people at the level of the individual. Only at the level of the individual, where one human being understands life at a level of another human being, can we create sustainingly meaningful, peaceful, and prosperous relationships. No other level of society or interaction should be allowed to establish the relationships that exist among the people of the different nations of the world. Our relationships, from the personal level all the way up to the international level, need to be established at the human level, at the level of the individual virtuous human beings. If we think of what Germany did under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, we can be certain that there was little opportunity to deal with Hitler rationally or peacefully. Although there would have been little chance to achieve a peaceful meeting of minds with Hitler, there could have been a peaceful meeting of minds and a peaceful understanding between the people of Germany and the people of other nations that eventually went to war with Germany in World War II. There definitely was a peaceful meeting of minds after Hitler was gone and the war ended. We will often find that our leaders cannot truly represent us in how we feel toward people of other nations. War does not exist between individual people, nations, and groups. War exists at the level of nations and groups between the leaders that could not find peaceful and sustainable solutions for the people. The people need to be the ones dictating the relationships between nations and groups, because our leaders have shown that they are incapable of creating international relationships that accord with the relationships between people.